In a world clamoring for connection, the most meaningful messages are found in the quiet. This is The Signal, a show about the craft of writing, the journey inward, and the courage to bring your truest voice to light. I'm Terry Pappy, your host and fellow writer, and I'm here to guide you through the noise to the signal. All right, MaryBeth, thank you so much for showing up today from the wilds of Idaho. Tell me where you're at, because this is incredible. What have you?
Yeah, I'm in the Bitterroot Mountains of Idaho. The nearest town is Salmon, Idaho, population 3,000. So I moved out here full time a couple years ago from Baltimore City. So the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I was living in a row house where one side of my wall was a bar and the other side was the owner of the bar. So it was like a lot of energy, a lot of noise, a lot of city life, which can be incredible. But this is the complete opposite of that. You know, we're on 100 acres here. I live in a 200 square foot tiny home now. We really don't have neighbors, and it is the complete opposite end of the spectrum and very welcomed.
Well, I tell you what, we're going to have a side conversation about tiny homes, because I have like this total fetish about tiny homes, the way they're building them today and how they do it. But let me tell you what, I would be sitting outside too, believe me, because that is just beautiful. And so for my listener, if you're listening to this on the audio version, like Apple Podcasts or whatever, please jump over to YouTube and check out this view. It's just beautiful, MaryBeth. For my listeners, so they get to know you just like I'm getting to know you, talk a little bit about your writing in general, what you do for a living, and all those things, because obviously we know that you hailed out of Baltimore City.
Yeah, came from Baltimore. My writing was really the first way that I feel like I started to be authentic. Just looking back, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to checking all the boxes, doing all the right things, right? Being a good girl, being a success on paper, and feeling like there was still something that wasn't fully expressed. There was a part of me that was still pretty muted. There was a lot of concern and worry about what other people would think about me or how they would interpret what I was saying. Really, that came from having a trauma history of abuse where I was told not to tell anybody. If I told anybody, then I'd get in trouble and my parents would get divorced and it would be my fault. So it's kind of conditioned from a really young age to be like, you can't speak your truth, especially not the vulnerable parts, because bad things will happen if you do that. I didn't realize how much writing was going to set me free from that old story, from that old programming of, I don't want to upset anybody. Because when you put yourself out into the world through writing, especially if it's a book, you can't just like take it back. It's social media, you can edit, you can delete, but people could still take screenshots. But there was a different level of like building up to a place of, I'm really putting myself out here in a very vulnerable and the most authentic me that I know in this season of my becoming. And it started with actually LinkedIn. I started sharing myself and my journey on LinkedIn. And it was about a decade ago when I began doing that. And that was when LinkedIn wasn't like it is today. Like today, it's flooded. There's so many people sharing AI generated content, and it's a lot to sift through. Then if somebody shared a personal vulnerable story, it was like, whoa. Now it's like, who can share the most vulnerable story? But I will say that for me in the beginning, it was writing about the ways that I had taken on work addiction and the ways that I was learning how to recover from work addiction, and being able to connect that to being brought up in a family where if I wasn't productive, if I wasn't successful, I wasn't loved. In fact, I was told everything that was wrong about me. And I never really connected the dots that was how then I showed up as an adult, right? It was like I was constantly wanting to overachieve in order to be loved, worthy, acceptable, and thought that was really the only way to do it, that it wasn't just by doing really good. It was like you had to go over the top, crush yourself, burn yourself out in order for it to be enough. And even that didn't seem like enough, because I had panic attacks all the time, insomnia, racing thoughts that I could not control around self-hate. And these were things that most people aren't saying out loud. So here's the deal. Most of us actually have some relationship to that. But most people are not like bringing that up at happy hour. Like, what do you do when you get racing thoughts? Like, how do you go through that? And so I really just started sharing my journey in that process, in my own inner journey, and how I was sharing vulnerably. And people were like, whoa, this is really helping me. And that's what solidified my not only desire to continue to be a writer, but to recognize that you can help so many more people that you don't even know are looking by sharing your truth and also sharing, like, what did you do to get better? Not just let's all be suffering together and normalize the suffering, but rather we are suffering and we can do something about it. There is power that we can cultivate from this pain, and there are other people that can relate to this. That was the beginning, I would say, a decade ago. And then that ultimately evolved into a newsletter and writing for different publications, and then ultimately having my book, Permission to Be Human, which came out in the pandemic because I was like, everybody's lives are changing so much. It was kind of like I'd been saying for years and years that I was going to write a book. And I felt like, well, if there was ever the perfect conditions to be locked up to get something done, it was the pandemic. That was when my book, Permission to Be Human, came out. And it was a totally different level of vulnerability, way more vulnerable than writing a post, even though I thought that was really vulnerable. And it was very much a realization of, this is something that is going to be potentially a part of my legacy. And I want to treat it that way. And I want to take it from the energy of, if I never get to share this information again, I know somebody else could benefit from it in the future if they pick up this book. And I can share it in a way that also is giving people steps on what to do, but stories on what it actually is to be the underdog in wanting to have healthy environments and create spaces where people are heard and trusted and nurtured. It's been quite a beautiful journey, and I'm really excited that you invited me to be a part of this conversation, because I really hope that more people find the courage inside of themselves to unleash their voice through writing, because it changes you and it helps you to express yourself and your unique medicine that you're here to offer the world.
Thank you for saying that, because I take that as a nod toward the work that I'm doing with my Verano Writers, and now my Verano Writers Virtual. So I have an in-person writing group that we meet every Monday. What I love about it is the surprises that are constantly happening, and everything you said just reaffirms what happens in that space. Because someone could read something and say, well, this isn't very good. This happened in the one we just had, where one of the writers did the prompt, and before she read what she wrote, she said, this isn't really good. And she's already bringing her value down, trying to kind of manage the room, because she was, whatever she was experiencing about what she wrote. And she read it and she blew us all away. And of course, she received all kind of wonderful feedback, some really interesting insights that other people were getting as a result of being the reader in the room and listening to what she wrote. And it's incredibly profound when we think as writers sometimes very myopically, we're like, okay, this is all me and I'm writing this, and it's in order to whatever the agenda is for the writing. But at the end of the day, what people get from it, and I've said this before, a good friend of mine told me when I was kind of vacillating over something I was writing, I couldn't figure out where to take it. And he's like, you have to let the reader come to their own conclusion. And I'm like, that is the most brilliant thing that I've ever heard, because the impact that you'll be having with what you write, regardless of whether it's a LinkedIn post, a newsletter, a blog, or something like a book or a novel, it is going to have a lasting impact. And I love that you touched on that. That whole thing right there is just like why I do what I do now. But I want to kind of circle back to like the courage. And before I do, I wanted to ask you, you're also a keynote speaker and you speak from the stage around the topic of your book, right?
So I have been keynoting for the same amount of time that I've been writing. It has been a really beautiful journey, and it was interesting. I remember the first person that hired me for a keynote, they were like, what can you talk about? We want you to be the one. And I was like, okay, yeah. Because before I started my own business, I worked for United Way, which is the largest fundraising organization in the world. And I was giving speeches all the time. I was getting up in front of large groups and giving speeches, but it was not a keynote address. It was addressing the audience, inspiring them to take action. But I was comfortable on stage, so it wasn't necessarily like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in front of everybody, as much as it was, it's my content, not me representing another organization. I'm the product. And the thing I'm offering you today is the thing that I hope you will have not only a takeaway, but that you'll continue to invest in and be a part of. Before I had my book, I was speaking on a variety of topics. But then after the book, it was like, Permission to Be Human is the keynote. We want a case of the books. We want you to stay and sign the books and do a meet and greet and have pictures. I would say the biggest shift in the keynoting was all of a sudden I was like really legitimate in a different level because people were able to buy cases of my thought leadership and provide them to everybody in the audience and let them go and meet the author and get it signed and have a side conversation that had a very different weight to it than when I was going and talking about a concept like authenticity, where people would absolutely come up and say beautiful things afterwards. But there wasn't like a bigger, here's how we stay connected. Here's how we keep doing the work together. Maybe there was a few people that would happen with, but it wasn't like everyone's getting this in the audience. And so that was a really significant change in the frequency of the keynotes, as well as the budgets of the keynotes, as well as just how fun it was to have cases and cases of books being shipped all over the world to do these. I mean, even if I was doing a remote keynote, like they would buy the books in other countries and then they'd all hold up their books so I could see them and that kind of thing. Even though I still had all this information inside of me, I was still talking about this information in my keynotes. As soon as the book was attached to it, it created a different level of legitimacy, and that people really saw me as an expert in a way that it was just sort of easier to be accepted as an expert. I didn't have to prove anything. Once you're a best-selling author, you have less to prove in certain aspects of, should I listen to you or not? Like, all these other people have listened, so there must be something here. It was really cool to see that. And it's also weird. It's kind of weird because it's like, I definitely am the exact same person. Like, I had all this information inside of me before, but there's something about it in society that creates a different level of like, you are admitted now. You can come forward now because you've done the work of putting it into a book.
Well, I also think that, and thank you for sharing that part of your journey, because, you know, a lot of people will write a book in order to enhance their speaker attention from the stage, and like, I want to be a keynoter, and so I'm going to write a book and blah, blah, blah. It's very kind of planned and structured and almost transactional in many ways. But I want to give credit to what you wrote and the fact that you wrote it in the way that you did. And just the title alone is something that there was an ache in society, to use your word, for it. And I think there was a certain level of resonance that was striking a chord of need, which is why it was so easily attractive, not to diminish your overall value, but there was something about that message that you had that only you could deliver, that you packaged in a book, but to have you deliver it in real time, live to an audience, that's a completely different experience. So creating that experience and those lived aha moments and insights and permission to kind of like take a look at the things that you've not wanted to look at as an audience member, completely different thing. And I can totally see the gravitational pull of that and why that was such a very, very successful journey for you. And so, and I've worked with many speakers with the National Speakers Association and so on. And for a while there, that's all I would work with when running my marketing business, and solopreneurs as well, because many keynoters are solopreneur consultants and they're authors and so on, where they have a training program or something like that. And what I found was it became way transactional, and they stepped away from the core of their voice and the real message that they were about. And it became more about producing and staying on the train of the progress of, like, if I don't write another book, I mean, I'm already thinking of like 3 or 4 keynoters that I know personally that have done this. They've kind of gotten on that treadmill of, okay, I got to put something else out or I'm not going to be relevant.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate because it takes away, I think, from the message and the authenticity that's there because it becomes commercial. So that's just kind of been my experience. So to see how that worked for you is like very fresh, the way the whole positioning of it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was kind of the opposite of, I think, what you're describing. So you're right. So many people, they think the book is what's going to get them on the stages. And I would encourage any listener here who has that thought, get on some stages now. Like, get on some stages now. Get yourself some practice in that. Even if you're doing it for free for local community groups, like get yourself, videotape yourself, get testimonials, like start doing that work because there's a business of speaking it does go hand in hand with being an author. But if you don't know the speaking basics, like how to work a stage, how to work a room, how to change the energy in the room, when to know people have stopped following you and you need to change course, how to engage people throughout the process, how to create an energetic and emotional arc for people so they're going on a journey with you and you're not just lecturing at them. Those are things that I worked one-on-one with coaches, speaking coaches. I worked with acting coaches. I went through $20,000 programs to learn how to really own a stage. It wasn't like she can speak. And so it's like, yes. And I could still have booked those gigs without those coaches and things. But I know that I wouldn't have been able to make it a business model without continuing to make my craft and my art of how to perform and deliver that to keep having value being added versus like, yeah, I can just go and talk about these concepts. It's like, well, what if I can actually transform the entire room?
Yeah.
There's a difference between those two things. And so if keynoting is something you want to do and you think the book is what's going to get you there, start speaking now. Get that experience now. Even if it's just at the dog park and somebody's talking to you, practice your bit. Get some stories out there. See how people react to it. It's amazing how you can use and work with different places and spaces that you are to see, like, does this resonate with this kind of person or does it not? I can get some feedback here and work it in. In fact, that's what LinkedIn was for me in a big way for my book. When I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to put a story in, a certain story, I'd write it out as a post. And based on how much engagement it got was how I decided whether or not I was going to put it in the book. Because it gave me a really good litmus test of this is striking a chord or it's definitely not.
Yeah, that's true. And obviously, I don't want to turn this into a big speaking thing, but if that's something that is executable, it's very competitive. But it's also something that you can have a lot of fun with, and it can help grow it can help grow your audience. So I'm glad you've had so much success with it.
Thanks.
So I want to get back to the kind of writing and voice. If you have a lived experience and you want to write narrative nonfiction, okay, but if you're sharing your life story and learnings and experience, the writer, and this was my personal experience as well, because nonfiction is my genre, what has to happen is you have to make a lot of choices, and those choices can be about how much you want to share, how raw you want to be, things like that. When you're finding your voice, sometimes that authenticity can help you find your voice, but you also don't want it to turn into a therapy session. So when you look back to when you were drafting your permission book, what really helped you recognize your own voice? And do you think writers find their voice, or did they uncover something, that was kind of there all along?
It's interesting because I think the concept of the word find is such a curious word because it's as if it were lost, right? And I have to go find it. Whereas uncover is like it was always there. I'm just taking a layer off. So I would go with uncover from the sense of like it's always been there. But for many people, it could feel like it's lost. So it could feel like I don't even know what it is. I have to go find it. But ultimately, where are you going to find it? Inside yourself. That's where you're going to find it. You might get inspiration. Like for me, nature is my number one inspiration. So I might get tons and tons and tons of inspiration by sitting with my horses and just allowing myself to be present and see what downloads I get in that moment. Other times it might be I read somebody else's writing that ignited something in me that I realized I have a version of that. I have a way of saying that. I have my personal journey around that. There's a lot of ways to get to that place within yourself. And I would say personally, it was a combination of seeing that it was possible. Oprah was my babysitter growing up. That's what I watched when I got home from school. I'd rush home, I'd watch Oprah. So I would see so many authors in her book clubs and these people making huge impacts, and they would be sharing their personal stories most of the time. There was a lot of personal stories being shared, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's so much value in this. Maybe there's something I have to offer when it comes to that kind of thing. When I was young, I started to think about it. I didn't think this is going to be me and I'm going to be the next. It wasn't like I'm going to be famous kind of thinking. It was more of, if this is helping me so much hearing these other people share their stories like this, and they've put them into a book, what would have to happen inside of me to get to that place? What would that look like? I used to always say I create spaces where stories are validated and voices are heard. And then I changed that to I create spaces where voices are heard and stories are released. Because I was going around as an adult looking for everybody else to validate me through my writing, through my speaking, tell me I'm good enough, tell me I'm worthy enough, tell me that this resonated with you. And only with that will I believe it's good enough. And even then, I won't think it's good enough. And so it was really powerful to finally get into a place for myself that I was like, oh my gosh, all I've been doing is sharing stories to be validated. I just wanted other people to say, that sucked. I can't believe you went through that, because I was never validated. And so it was like, oh, I can use this writing to get validated, right? And I can be so celebrated in being this underdog kind of energy. And then I realized that was actually a part of what was holding me back. That was like the first layer when we go to find. It was like the one most on the surface was like, tell me that I'm good enough. And then after I healed that, then it was like, it actually doesn't matter what you think. I hope that it resonates with you. I hope it makes an impact, but I'm not looking for you to tell me this was good enough. I'm looking to my heart to tell me that this was good enough. I'm looking to my spirit to feel into that. Yeah, this is the thing for me to share, and I'm going to share it unconditionally with no attachments and not looking for approval or anything like that. Most people's biggest fears is that something bad's going to happen because you share yourself and your story and your voice in that way. When you get to a place within yourself that you have uncovered that, and then you just live with that always uncovered, it really changes the internal dialogue and the internal story about why you're doing it and whether or not it matters, and all of those pieces, those tentacles that could be attached to it in our layered experiences as humans.
I think there's a lot of fears like that live with every new or even experienced writer as they deepen the work that they're doing. And I did want to talk to you a little bit as we wrap up here on courage, because like I said earlier about how we try to control the audience expectation by saying, well, this isn't that good, or this is just a draft, or whatever. We're trying to protect the audience as well as ourselves from harsh criticism. And being a writer is being courageous. If someone wanted to write more honestly, what would they have to, in your mind, have to stop protecting or open up to?
Those are great. I love the stop protection and opening up. So it's like boundaries in different ways. They'd have to stop protecting their fears, because their fears are what's keeping them believing that there's something to be afraid, like you shouldn't do it because it's consequences, the potential consequences of what could happen. Obviously leaning towards the bad things. The thing that I would stop protecting yourself. One of the greatest pieces of coaching advice that I have received and also given is that when those voices come up, the what ifs, or I don't know if, or maybe this would happen. A lot of times we say, like, just shut those down, like shut them up, like make them go away. That's just your ego trying to take the joy from you. Actually invite you to sit down next to those voices and ask them some questions. So it's like, okay, and talk to that voice in your head like it's your inner child that's just really afraid. And so instead of saying like, shut up, you're being such a sissy for not putting yourself out there, which was my sort of default mode, was like to bully myself into doing things, motivating myself from fear, versus, hey, sweetheart, I know that this is scary. It's a big step and I know you're ready for it. So let's talk about what you're afraid of and I'll help you through that one at a time. And we can get closure around each one of those things one at a time. We can go through it. Oh, you're afraid of how people might interpret you. Okay, let's sit with that. Let's sit with that and let's go into the best case scenario of how people can interpret you. And also recognize that there's going to be people in the world that are going to interpret you based on their own stuff, their past traumas, their past triggers, their journey that they're going on that has nothing to do with anything you shared. It's just you are the representation of what is triggering for them. And there could be people that are triggered directly from what you say. And you have to recognize that those are invitations for those people to get more healing in their lives. And that's actually a gift to be in a position where you can support more people in their healing. So having an inner dialogue with yourself instead of like, just do it, versus let's do it together. Fears and everything. Courage is doing something in the face of fear. Not having fear. Fearless is not having the fear. Courage is like, I'm afraid and I'm still going to take another step forward. And I know there are risks involved with this, and I'm still going to take another step forward. And so that's sort of, the second half of it. What do you need to let in? What do you need to open up to is the best possible thing, the best possible scenario. It's really opening yourself up, though, to the people who are meant to hear this message is exactly who it's going to reach.
That's it. That is so it.
Yep. And the people that this message is not for, it's fine. They don't need to be your follower. They don't need to get your book. They don't need to hire you for a keynote. It's fine. There are more people who are meant to hear it than aren't. It's just getting into the spaces where they are, having your message going to that's going to call in and attract that like energy that's like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this. I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me just reading the preface of the book because they felt so seen in just the first couple sentences of being an underdog for caring about people at work. And that's really what my book is about. Feeling like I said this book is a love letter to anyone who's ever felt like an underdog for caring about people at work.
Oh,
caring about the human experience. And so there's people who will not get that.
Right.
Because they are not those people. There's more people who aren't those people. It was normal for people not to understand that. So the underdog piece was like, then I was calling on all the other underdogs, all the others. And a huge part of why I changed my career. So I was doing workplace culture consulting and now I help people rewild themselves. Kind of different, right?
I love that, by the way.
Pretty big shift. And it was from my own inner journey shift of like, I was going into companies, helping companies all get along with each other, learn how to give each other permission to be human, learn how to create a culture around their values. And there was 100% of the time, the person that was creating the biggest issues was not the person that was excited to read my book, was not the person that couldn't wait to work with me one-on-one, right? They were the ones that were forced into those situations. And most of the time I could turn them pretty quickly. But was that really the energy I wanted to invest my life in? Like, did I really want to go into environments day after day after day with people like begrudgingly working with me when there were hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of other people who would be so happy to and would be soaking it in and so eager to do the work? I mean, I can do work with either side, but I would choose the ones who are saying, what you're saying, that's so my jam. You are vibing out on my frequency. Let's do this thing. And that's what your writing does. It attracts in the ones that are feeling that vibe and it repels the ones who aren't. And I think when we try to play it safe, that was a huge part of my personal journey is like, oh, I got to, do the thing that they can get the sponsorship for and make sure they got the budget and this and that. That was a huge part of my life for a very, very, very long time. And then it was like, I just don't need to work with those people. That's fine. There are more than enough human beings in the world that your magic, your secret sauce, the thing that you are here to give, you just have to keep sharing it until you find and attract the others who have been looking for you and didn't even know it. And that is very much a real thing. It's not like, oh, you're special. It's like, that is literally how it works. That is how it works when you are committed to the vision.
And tapping into the signal. And MaryBeth Hyland, this has been a great conversation. And I think that's a great place for us to wrap. I'd love to keep talking to you and maybe get on that horse behind you and go for a fun, wild bareback ride. Take me back to my old horse riding days.
Yeah.
But I really love everything that you shared today.
Well, it's been a gift. I love what you're doing in the world. I love that you're encouraging more people to express themselves in this authentic way that then can create so much more impact. So I just want to keep encouraging whoever's listening to do it, do the thing, trust yourself. And if you don't trust yourself fully right away, that's okay. You can build that trust. And it's just one step at a time without judgment of pace. Just keep moving forward and know that groups and communities like Terry have is an incredible way to not be alone in that process and to know it's very human of you to have fears and concerns and not want to feel like you're trying to figure this all out by yourself. You don't have to. Join Terry's group and know that there are so many places and spaces where other people are in the exact situation that you're in mindset wise, and that you can help each other and you can recognize that you're here to do big things. Writing is one of the best ways to make that happen.
Writing is a blessing, and thank you so much for that unsolicited plug. But
you're welcome.
You're right, and it doesn't need to be anything formal. Just get the journal out and just start scribbling, whatever it takes to just get the words out. It's an amazing experience, and I love that you've had the transition, the awakening that you've had in your life, and you're a living example of permission. So thank you so much, MaryBeth.
Thanks, Terry.